Dear church, let's talk about the church and sexuality. Hello and welcome to the Dear Church podcast. I'm your host, Chris McCurley, joined by my friend Steve Holliday. You didn't have to come too far for this podcast.
Yeah, this was a pretty short drive.
Pretty short drive. Steve's actually in Dixon and has a ministry that I'm excited for him to tell us about and maybe share with other congregations, people that are tuning in. Maybe I'll have an opportunity to connect with you and have you come and do one of your seminars. But as we jump into this, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you do and the ministry you're involved in.
Okay, so my background's youth ministry.
Okay.
About 12 years of church-based youth ministry. Uh-huh. And then we began this ministry about 20 years ago. In August, it'll be 20 years.
Wow.
It's our 20th anniversary year. We started this ministry specifically for teens around addictive sexual behavior. Okay. Because back at the time, there were a lot of kids getting into, pornography struggles. So many conversations I had with kids in our youth group. Yeah. I'm doing this and I want to stop, but I can't stop, don't know how to stop. Over the years, we've morphed into expanding to pretty much all areas of sexuality. Yeah. So I have a degree in counseling. I'm not a licensed professional counselor. So I don't do mental health counseling. I do what I do under the ministry umbrella and deal specifically with sexual issues. But my specific training is in sexual addiction, sexual identity, and then sexual trauma, with the biggest focus on that in the sexual trauma piece. Okay. And so we basically now, when we go to church, we're talking to teens through adults. A part of a normal seminar is talking to kids about sex. And so we get a lot of interest in grandparents, great-grandparents who are so concerned with what world their kids or their grandchildren are growing up in. But there's a counseling side of the ministry. It's a small piece. Right. And then the larger part is going out and doing presentation seminars, usually at churches.
Trying to be proactive rather than reactive.
Right.
Although their reactive is a part of this as well, because sometimes you have to go in and try to clean up some messes and things of that nature. You're probably like me when you were in youth ministry, when I was in youth ministry. Cell phones were just kind of coming around. Social media was just kind of getting started. And I would suspect that has brought a whole new level of issues when it comes to porn and images and things of that nature. So have you seen an uptick in that kind of realm and teens dealing with sexual addiction from that standpoint?
For certain, the term sexting was just coming on the scene when I was in graduate school. So I was already officially out of youth ministry at that point. Cell phones with cameras just coming on the scene. I mean, at this point, the average teen is producing their own porn and marketing their own porn. It's self-produced, self-marketed porn. In the sexting and so posting things on social media, even if it's not nude, if it's not an overtly graphically sexual picture, the purpose behind it is to be alluring and get sexual interest. So it's softcore porn at best.
Yeah. And what have you found age-wise when this starts?
Well, I've been involved in situations with kids under 10 who are doing that, who have posted videos, posted pictures of themselves. I would say on average it's by middle school. Yeah. So if there are any parents or church leaders listening who are thinking, we really need to be talking to our kids by the time they're in high school. If you're waiting till the kids are in high school, it's cleanup. Yeah. They're already pretty heavily involved in this stuff by high school.
And I think one of the things I appreciate about your ministry, among many, is that you're starting the conversation. And we haven't always done that well within the church. We haven't always presented sex well in the church. It's one of those subjects that maybe we've steered clear of because you don't talk about that in church. Mm-hmm. And if we do talk about sex, it's either, we look at the spectrum like this. Sex is either God or it's dirty and, it's we don't need to talk about it. It's necessary, but you better save it for somebody you love, right? And so we don't always present it in the best light. What would you say to churches about approaching the topic and how to better approach that? Because if the whole world is talking about it, certainly the church needs to be, right?
Yeah, I've frequently said about the only two places you can go and not hear anything about sex are church and home. Yeah. Everywhere else, we're bombarded about it.
Yeah.
And it should be the opposite.
And why do you think that is?
Well, if we go back to, historical roots in Christianity, somewhere around 300 AD, we get this message that sex is terrible, awful. The body is dirty, and so and I think that is just continued through the ages.
Yeah,
obviously some ebb and flow, but by and large, the church doesn't. I don't think people know how to address sexuality.
Yeah.
I think most seminaries don't do much in preparation. I know most Christian college programs that I've been loosely affiliated with or have been invited in to speak, or I know people who've come through those programs, they're not getting much of any kind of concentration in how to deal with sexuality. And so it's just don't know how. Fear of our own stuff. I remember when I was a youth minister, and we haven't talked about my own journey yet, but addictive sexual behavior goes back to my earliest memories. It's there by 5 years of age.
Wow.
And so here I am, a youth minister, but before beginning recovery in 2002. Jerry and Lynn Jones came and did a marriage seminar at the church I was at. Mm-hmm. And at that point, they were giving about a 15-minute section of one presentation to pornography. Oh. And I remember during that time, I'm just staring at the floor, hoping nobody can find out that I've got this secret. So I think there's a part of it, we don't talk about it. Right. Out of our own shame and fear, somebody's going to figure out or learn that we might be having a struggle.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned your story. Let's go there and talk a little bit about how this has led you into this ministry because of your own struggles growing up.
So there was sexual abuse in my world. If it's a 100-piece puzzle, I've got 99 pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah.
The piece that I don't have is the concrete memory of it happening.
Okay.
But I've got all the other pieces there.
Yeah.
And I know where it was, and I know within a year or so of when it happened.
Right.
So that began compulsive masturbation, deep shame, feeling dirty, feeling worthless. I'm terrible. God couldn't possibly love me. God wants to spit when he sees me. So I grew up, that was how I felt about myself. Not many memories of childhood. That was all just blocked out. In around college, student at a Christian university, discovered video stores. Now, again, this dates me. VCRs were, beta machines were out and VCRs were in.
Yes.
And I had a roommate who had a TV and a VCR. And when he left town one weekend, I went to the store looking for a movie and discovered, there are movies I've never seen before. Now, this is not the X-rated in the back. This is just on the shelf. But I can tell by the covers, these aren't movies I would have seen in a theater. These are just an excuse. And so I started renting. And here's the insanity, the absolute insanity of it. I would rent a stack, maybe 3 movies. I'd go back to the room. I'd put one in. I'd fast forward to find a scene. I'd have my moment of pleasure. Mm-hmm. I would be so overcome with guilt. I'd take all of them back and return them, and it hasn't been an hour yet.
Yeah.
But then the next day I might go back and re-rent one or two of the ones that I had in total insanity. So I recognize the misuse of sexuality often from a logic standpoint doesn't make any sense at all.
Right.
It's something way deeper going on.
Which is kind of addiction anyway. I mean, that's, you understand it. There's this vicious cycle. You do it. You feel the guilt and shame. You try to repent of that, and then you go right back to it.
I have a friend in recovery who used the phrase that addiction is when you can't get enough of the thing you hate.
Yeah.
I thought, wow, I like that. I'm going to borrow that because that sums it up very nicely.
Addiction is when you can't get enough of the thing you hate.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I finally reached out for help in the spring of 2002 in Nashville. We lived in North Carolina, but I found this place in Nashville called Bethesda Workshops. Okay. And it's Christ-centered treatment for sexual addiction. And I was on their website, found this self-test, SAST, sexual addiction screening test. And I started going down. And by the time I got to the end, I think all but 2 or 3 were yeses. And that's the moment that the light bulb went off. It's like, okay, this is what I have. I've never put that term with my struggle. Yeah. But at that point, I realized, there's a name for it. This is what it is. And there are people who can help. So April 2002, I went to Bethesda, and I used the phrase, tears want to come up right now, life began, because it was such a different existence, having gotten the secrets out, being equipped, having tools, learning that I can talk to people. I don't have to keep the world away with this wall.
Yeah.
Because my wife described it as our kids get access to about half of me. Yeah. Kids at church got access to maybe a little bit less of that, but they still got to see a good bit of me. She felt like the wall that I had built between me and her, the only thing she got to see was kind of like a Wilson on the show Home Improvement.
Right.
You'd be about to see this much, and that's all you ever get access to. Yeah. Because I was so afraid somebody is going to figure out the secret.
Yeah. When did you let her in on all of this?
After I got back from Bethesda.
Okay.
Holly and I talk about this when we do our workshop together on healing from trauma.
Yeah.
I'm married to a sexual trauma survivor. I'm a sexual trauma survivor. We've dealt with it as we raised our kids. Unfortunately, multiple of our kids have also had to deal with that. And so to me, that's a part of my background, my story, and how it leads me into the ministry that I do.
Yeah.
But we laugh about it now. It was not funny when it happened. On my way back from Bethesda, I call her and I say, hey, we need to have a conversation. Let me know when you've got time the next couple of days, some things I need to share with you. And you probably want to make an appointment with your counselor to talk about what we talk about afterwards.
Yeah.
And then said nothing more. And it was like textbook how not to do this, how it's not fair to a spouse.
Right.
Disclosure. I should have waited till I got home and had a bit more of a conversation.
Right.
But Holly was so gracious. And in her words, it was like this was the missing piece.
Yeah.
We had done some marriage healing a couple of years prior, and things had gotten so much better. First 8 years of our marriage were horrible. But in 2000, things started getting so much better. And now with this, the missing piece in, she felt, okay, now we can handle this at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm interested in that part of the story because, things have gotten obviously a lot better, and now you're in this ministry, and I think it's always really great when you can come from a perspective of, I've lived this, let me tell you what not to do, and let me tell you, how to overcome and all that. So you two are doing these seminars all over, and what are some of the responses you've got? I mean, it's got to be overwhelming how many people are dealing with this in their own family, right?
Yeah. In my perspective, there is not a family in any church who is not connected to these struggles.
Yeah.
Whether it's the parents of the family, if it's adult children, maybe their parents or siblings, the children. I mean, somewhere within one generation, somebody in that family is dealing with some significant stuff, and oftentimes it's sexual trauma, and that can be a one-time. It happened for 1 minute.
Yeah.
It was a one-time event, or it happened over and over for years and years.
Yeah.
The effect of that can be equally devastating. Yeah. So sometimes we look at it and say, well, that right there wasn't so bad. Let's never minimize sexual trauma because it can be devastating.
Sure.
Even if it's a one-time brief thing.
Sure.
At this point in time, gender identity, sexual identity, sexual orientation, confusion, or a teenager might not feel confused. They may say, this is who I am. Parents may disagree with that as a life choice.
Sure.
And especially depending on the age, I mean, if it's a 12-year-old versus a 25-year-old, how parents need to respond to that is right.
Yeah.
How they need to respond to that is different.
Yeah.
And certainly the porn struggles. I mean, I cannot imagine a marriage where that's not an issue or it hasn't been an issue. Right. Whether it's, hey, I dealt with that as a teenager or as a young adult. It's not an active thing now, but it's part of my background. And so it does have an effect on how we relate to each other, or if it's an active thing. And again, whether that's male or female or both.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of clients who are female who are dealing with their own addictive sexual behavior issues. So again, as church leaders, if we're thinking, we need to get our men exposed to this, well, that's half right. We do need to get our men exposed to it.
Well, I mean,
we also need our women exposed to it.
Even hearing you say that, I would default to men, this being almost exclusively male problem, but it's not.
No, I would say 30 and under, At this point in time, the generation that's 30 and under is pretty much a 50-50.
Really?
thing.
Okay. Yeah. So what can we do? What as churches, and let's start there, and then we'll talk about families. As churches, what can we do better?
Talk. Yeah. Present God's plan.
Yeah.
Let's try to shift gears, and instead of, sex is wrong, sex is dirty, we focus on lust, and we talk about how bad it is, and we better not be doing that. Let's present God's plan, because God's plan is a beautiful thing, and it's, God is very pro sex. First commandment God gave to human was have a lot of sex. Loosely paraphrased.
Fruitful and multiply.
That's right. Have a lot of sex.
Yeah.
So God's definitely not an anti-sex God. Let's present God's plan and the beauty and the wisdom of it.
Yeah.
And then we also address, and in a broken world, most of us don't experience sex the way God intended, because the enemy often comes in and starts destroying, robbing, contaminating that at an age before we even know what's going on.
Absolutely.
So let's talk to people about how do we handle when Satan has tried to hijack it and get people help.
Yeah. And then within families, I would assume the same kind of problem. We don't really talk about it much or try to regulate it much or whatever, because I think sometimes, and this sounds like it sounds very judgy, but I think from my own experience, it's just kind of easier to say out of sight, out of mind. And maybe we bury our head in the sand and say, well, my kid wouldn't do that or whatever. Maybe not. But what can we do within our families to be more proactive?
Begin conversations at an early age.
Yeah.
My encouragement, by age 3 or 4, we're teaching our children appropriate names for body parts. We don't make up little silly pet names that we have to whisper and laugh when we say them. Boys have a penis, girls have a vagina. It's that simple.
Yeah.
Boys and girls are different. Yeah. Now, it's not just physical differences, but there are physical differences between boys and girls.
Yeah.
If somebody wants to see a private part, so we give them terminology. There are parts that are private. They're not bad. They're not dirty.
They're just private.
They're just private.
Yeah.
If somebody wants to see a private part, here's how to respond. Yeah. You can tell them no. And as soon as you can, let us know about that.
Yeah.
Because sometimes they can't let us know instantly.
Yeah.
So just try to put it in terms where we're de-shaming and taking as much room for guilt out of the picture as possible.
Sure.
That it's not their fault. If somebody tries to do that, they've not done anything wrong. Right. Let's keep it in right perspective. The person who asked that, or the person who tried to force it to happen, or the person who did force it to happen, they're the one who did something wrong. But the child, completely innocent in that situation.
Sure.
So let's equip them, give them permission over their body. If they don't want Aunt Sally or Grandma to give them a hug, you don't have to let them.
Yeah.
That we take our own embarrassment or our own fear of how somebody's going to respond, we take that out of the picture and we allow a child to determine, do they want a hug? Do they not? Yeah. Who do they want a hug from? If we can do that, just very basic things at an early age, and then be consistent about the conversation. It's not we need to have the talk when they're 12 or 13 or later.
Right. Because that's true.
We need to have a talk early on, and then consistently reinforce 1 to 2 minutes, just really brief, teachable moments.
Yeah.
If we do that, then it's normal to our kids by their earliest memory. There was never a time when mom and dad didn't talk to them in a healthy way about sex.
It wasn't taboo.
Right.
Yeah.
Not a threatening way. I'm not trying to use fear to dictate their behavior.
Yeah.
We're just equipping them with accurate information.
Yeah.
If we do that consistently, by the time they're 10, 12 years old, they are so armed with accurate information that the lure of the misinformation the world throws at them, it's like water off a duck's back.
Yeah.
Because they've already been well grounded in accurate truth.
I like that. Starting early with a foundation that's grounded in scripture and truth, rather than letting the world dictate kind of what they believe. I can remember when my son was probably 4th or 5th grade, which now I'm hearing you talk was probably too late. We're driving the 10-hour drive from Abilene, Texas to Paragould, Arkansas to see family. And I decide that it's just me and him. This is going to be the time. We're going to have the talk on the way down there. And as we're going along, I just broached the subject. I said, let's talk. What do you know about sex? And he said, I already know all about that. And I go, really? Who told you? And he mentioned his friend's name. And I'm like, okay, well, we probably need to do some cleaning up here, because I'm not sure your friend is an expert on this. He's the same age as you. And that really kind of hit me hard that he's already at 5th grade, which you have pointed out, that's probably even a little late in the game. Already at 5th grade, he's talked about some of these things. At least it's been a discussion among his friends. It was eye-opening to me that I was being naive here. And so we had more conversations about it from that point on. Well, I have 2 girls as well. That was more difficult. With a boy, I don't feel like it's as difficult. But with girls, my wife thankfully took a lot of the lead on that. But we had those discussions as well because I realized with the advent of social media, and if these things are popping up on my timeline without my consent, what are they seeing? Yeah. Right? So you talked about the proactive piece. Let's talk about the reactive piece, or like you said, the cleanup. What are some things or resources or tools? I know they can come to you and talk, but also what are some other things for the cleanup aspect of it? They've dealt with this, their sexual trauma. How can they move past it?
It's finding a safe place to talk and tell the story where they're validated, a recognition that this is real, that they're, as they're sharing with us, hopefully they're experiencing that we accept they're being honest, not that they're making this up. And especially with children, that's so important that as they're talking about something that might be the most shameful, secret, fearful thing that's ever happened. Yeah. If they have any perception that we don't believe them, we're just re-traumatizing them. And so to be able to validate for someone their courage to talk about it, wow, I'm so thankful that you are courageous enough, brave enough, able to share this. Depending on the age of the person, different conversation if it's a 13-year-old versus a 40-year-old who's sharing their background. Sometimes we need to help them find a good professional resource. Yeah. Sometimes support groups may be very appropriate. Even if that's if somebody's already involved in a Bible study, and so they're involved in a fellowship, a small fellowship group, that could be a very healthy place for somebody to share, hey, this is something that's happened to me. This is something I'm starting to deal with. Yeah. I need a group of friends who will let me tell my story. Right. That level of support can be priceless in someone's life. The things to avoid are making or giving somebody a reason to feel like they're not being believed or that they're being blamed for it. Yeah. Had a conversation very recently. A young lady, a teenage girl, her mother found out that the girl had been sexually abused, and she blamed the girl because she was at a place that she shouldn't have been. Right. And the message was, well, if you hadn't been there, that wouldn't happen, so it's your fault. Right. Boom. Went on, didn't do anything else. Yeah. Now the girl's an adult and is in therapy. Yeah. And starting to deal with it. Yes. But that's a big piece we're going to have to go back and work through now, because basically half of a lifetime with this message, it was my fault, which is a lie. Yeah. But half a lifetime, that has now felt true. Right. That's a big obstacle to have to work through now. Yeah, that's incredible that she still came around and told somebody else instead of living the rest of her life believing, well, I can't talk about this because it's my fault. I just got to deal with the guilt and the shame, But in the years since, it's a mess. Yeah. It has produced a mess. Yeah. Talk a little bit about what you and Holly approach in your seminars. So a church is going to ask you to come and speak, and I guess it doesn't have to be a church, but right. They're going to come and ask you to speak on a weekend seminar, whether that's Friday, Saturday, so whatever that looks like. What does that pertain to? What are you talking about? What are some of the sessions that you do? So it can look pretty varied. We can do some specific presentations for a subset of the population. Yep. Like, hey, we want to have a men's breakfast and address something that might be, particularly relevant to men. If we want to do something specifically for the teens and their parents. But generally speaking, we do it all ages. It's from teens all the way through, male, female, all combined. And we're addressing everything from a theology of sex. Basically, let's look through Scripture. Here's the beauty of the plan that God intended for this to look like. Sure. And then in a broken world, now let's have some presentations that talk about the broken side of this and how do we deal with, recover from to try to repair what's happened.
Right.
And typically we'll address addictive sexual behavior, sexual identity, and sexual trauma. And we have individual presentations for each of those three topics. And then there's one where we just kind of hit the highlight. It's a bird's eye view of all three.
Yeah.
Called Current Issues in Sexuality. So we can go as deep or keep it more of a just informative bird's eye view. Holly and I, when we speak together, we speak together specifically on the Healing from Trauma workshop.
Yeah.
Not every church schedules that as part of their seminar. We do that like with AIM, Adventures in Missions, out in Lubbock. Yeah. Every year they have us come in the first weekend after the new class of students arrives.
Sure. And
we do that 4-hour workshop on healing from addiction, struggles, and trauma.
Yeah.
I've done that. Free Hardeman had me come in, and we did a several-hour session for their counseling staff, for students who are going to be staff at the Bible camp that summer, and then anybody else who wanted to come. But it was really tailored for the frontline people who are working with teens and students.
Yeah.
And so, we've done that in several different formats, but the basic content is when we're wounded and when that woundedness produces a struggle, that can be a behavior struggle or an emotional, I'm shut off. I've built this wall, disconnected from my emotions. What does it look like across 5 dimensions? And we certainly address the spiritual in that, but it's not limited to a spiritual aspect, because we are emotional beings. We think, we have beliefs, or there's mental side. It is a behavioral, or often manifests itself in behaviors. And then there's the relational component. So we try to address those 5 aspects in that healing workshop.
Wow. Yeah, so a lot of material, a lot of information.
And we don't cover all of that.
Right. It's kind of tailored. Right. It's tailored to whoever, whatever they want. As we close up here, tell our viewers, listeners, how they can get a hold of you, what kind of resources you offer, anything that you have that you want to share with them.
So on our website, we have several of our presentations available.
Mm-hmm. What's the name of the website?
UltimateEscape.org.
UltimateEscape.org.
Double E in the middle. Both words are complete.
Okay.
That's the most common mistake. UltimateEscape.org. We have a podcast where the first 4 episodes are introductory. So number 1 is my story. Episode 2 is Holly's story.
Yep.
Episode 3 is our couple's journey from a horrible mess to a much more healed mess, because we're not perfect, and I don't think
we're always
marriage,
right.
Yeah. So just trying to be real. I'm not saying that we have arrived and
figured it all out.
Perfect, but we're way better than we ever dreamed it could be.
Yeah.
And then episode 4 is about the ministry. How did Ultimate Escape develop? Once you get past the first 4 episodes, they're topical.
Okay.
And so like one episode is specifically about masturbation.
Okay.
Is it okay? Is it not? We got an episode. We do a deep dive into that.
Okay.
There are several on sexual trauma.
Okay.
There's one on addiction. There's at least one on how do we talk to our kids about sex. So we have the video presentation on our website, and then we have that podcast that addresses it also. That's one of the most popular presentations we do. I would say the fun theology of sex and the talking to kids about sex are probably the 2 most popular,
I bet,
of all that we do. And then how to contact me. I don't do email much.
Okay.
So give me a call.
Yeah.
My phone number is on the web. You can't miss my phone number on the website. Call Ultimate Escape, or you can shoot a text, either one. But I will respond way faster if you call me or text me. If you email me, I might get back to you in a month or so.
I've never emailed you, but my texts are always answered, and so I can vouch for that. And hey, Steve, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for the opportunity to be with you. I've enjoyed this.
Yeah, best of wishes to you and Holly and your ministry. I'm just so thankful that we've got people like you out there approaching a difficult topic and help people cope with it.
Thank you.
And we want to tell our viewers and listeners a big thanks for tuning in. If you have a question about today's episode, you can email me at chris.mccurley@rippleoflight.com. If you have a question specifically for Steve, we will forward it on to him, and I'm sure he will be more than willing to answer any questions you might have. As always, thank you for tuning in. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Sincerely, Chris.